Exploring theology, doctrine, and all of the fascinating subjects in between, broadcasting from an undisclosed location, Dead Men Walking starts
now.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Dead Men Walking Podcast. Thanks for coming along for the ride. Thanks for checking out dfwpodcast.com, leaving us comments, leaving us reviews, checking out the merch site. We appreciate you telling a friend and supporting the show. First and foremost, though, we want to tell you this episode is brought to you by Page 50. Listen, guys, your business, your legacy, don't partner with just anyone. You need people you can trust. Whether you own a business, you're an influencer at your business, maybe you're just in sales and you want to increase your pipeline, you got to get Page 50. Page 50 is a distinctly Christian company, and that means they do things a little bit differently. Page 50 is committed to providing quality marketing services to all of their clients and customers. They're going to help you make the most out of your social media platforms, create content, and elevate your website so you can grow your impressions and reach your goals. They treat each of their clients' account like their own because they're all about building that trust and making it last. From web design to social media management, from consulting to execution, from search engine optimization to grassroots campaigns, it's their desire to help your business tell its story to the widest audience possible. Go visit www.page50.com. That's spelled out PAGEFIFTY.com, and see how these brothers in the Lord can help your business, or just click through the link at the bottom of this episode description. Integrity, innovation, results, Page 50. We love the guys over at Page 50. Stuart and those gentlemen, I actually met them at a Fight Laugh Feast conference, which kind of ties in to what we're going to be talking about today. But first and foremost, what we're going to be talking about today was kind of started just because you guys have been listening long enough to know, and I've been talking about what happened here in Michigan over the last election in November 2022. The Democrats here in Michigan took the House, the Senate, and the governorship for the first time in 32 years. Also, there was a referendum on the ballot that went to the public to vote for a constitutional amendment that passed. It was called Proposition 3, among three other propositions on the ballot. And this proposition essentially allowed abortion up to the second of birth. It allowed castration of minors without parental consent. It is the most liberal, most sweeping legislation. Now, it's not a law. It's a constitutional amendment, constitutionally protected in the state constitution for these type of issues. So I wanted to have a guy on that has experience in this in the public sphere, obviously, has experience with legislative things, politics, government, Christianity, Reformed theology, things like that. And I couldn't think of anyone better. And, you know, I was scouring the internet, guys, for a bio, and I found this on his LinkedIn, and I just love this bio. It's so cheeky. You could say many things about this gentleman, but I love that it says host of Crosspolitic Studio, CEO of Pengo Media and Dropwave, and barbecue and scotch chief taster. Yes, it's Gabe Rench, a.k.a. the Water Boy. Gabe, how are you, sir?
Hey, Greg, thanks for having me on your show, man.
I love that you're a barbecue and scotch chief taster. Now, is that a self-imposed title?
Very much, yeah. And I, someone's got to do
it. Right. Someone has to do it. So I think everyone that listens to this podcast are probably pretty familiar with you, but if you just want to give us a little 60-second bio really quick for any new listeners, introduce yourself.
Yeah, I was born in Texas and raised up in a Christian family, and my mom and dad kind of moved us around a little bit. After '97, we ended up in Oregon, and then eventually I went to California, Colorado, and now I'm in Idaho. I came to Moscow, Idaho, which is the town I still live in. I live in now, to go to University of Idaho, and that's where I met my wife, and I now serve as a deacon at King's Cross, also here, which is a plant of Christ Church, Pastor Doug Wilson's church here in town. And I got 3 kids and live on a little boutique ranch 3 miles outside of town. And if any of your listeners have been listening to my show this last 6 months, I lost 11 chickens throughout the year to some coyote that kept getting in my chicken coop. And so my last chicken that's still alive is named Katniss because she made it through the Hunger Games. But
she made it through the Hunger Games. So now, was it going under? Was it going over? How was that coyote getting in? Was it digging underneath run?
Yeah, I got this old 1950s barn, and it's got all sorts of holes in it. So every time I patch up another hole, there's another hole there. It's another one. I think I might have things under control now, but there's a lot of trial and error. 11 chickens.
Yeah. Well, hey, gotta get those organic eggs. They're $8, $9 a dozen in the store right now. So you're making your money just on the eggs. So the reason why I wanted to have you on, just because I've had a lot of people reach out to me in Michigan. I always laugh. I need to change the intro. It says undisclosed location, but we've talked so much now, people probably know exactly where I live. But we're in Michigan. Last week we had on.
1194. My address
Right.
is, you know.
I'm not getting that. I'm not getting that specific. All right. There are still
Yeah.
some crazy people out there, but last week on the podcast, we had the president of End Abortion Now Ohio on, along with another pastor friend of mine who's working through some legislation in Ohio because the liberals and progressives had said we want to make a red state Ohio, the poster child, and mimic what Michigan did. So they're working through some abolition legislation and things like that. So I had a lot of people reach out to me and go, well, what is the Christian response? What should we do? I know a lot of people go right to Romans 13, and we're not going to stay too long on that because, boy, I think your show, my show, and many others talked about that during the COVID era. But I just wanted to get you on and have you talk about what is our response when we have something like a civil government that is not acting according to Scripture, meaning a government that brings justice to evildoers and protects the righteous. I think we've seen in the last, geez, especially for the last 30 years, going back farther than that the U.S. government doesn't seem to be bringing justice to evildoers or protecting the righteous. It looks like they've kind of flipped that a little bit. So, first and foremost, just to set the foundation in this discussion, I kind of wanted to know what is the Christian to do? What is your because and the reason why I'm asking this is because you look at what you guys are doing out there in Idaho. I think you're a pretty conservative state, but in a pretty liberal area, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And you guys are kind of the beacon of hope in Moscow. And a lot of people are looking nationally looking to you guys on how you've modeled through education and in church and things like that. So is it something similar? Is it different in every state and every municipality? And where do we start, do you think?
Yeah, like you alluded to, I live in Moscow, Idaho. Latah County is my county, and I'm in this blue dot in a red state. There's only, I think, two blue dots in our state, and everything else is red. And so there's been a lot of clashing for the last 25 years. I've been here since 2002, and I mean, there's not barely a year goes by where we don't have some sort of fight with our local city or the liberals in town, or some sort of either social or political fight in the last 23 years, 23 years since I've been here. So it's been quite an interesting climate that I think the nation's now starting to really have. So what happened to us locally for the last 20, 25 years is now starting to happen nationally. Uh,
Mm.
in terms of, I think, building community, oftentimes we, especially conservatives, we always look to the big races to change our lives, the big voting races to change our lives. So we look to, oh, we need a better governor or we need a better president. And really what you need is a better sheriff. Really what you need is a better county commissioner. So
Mm.
we don't pay attention to the local elections, and we generally maybe only really show up to the state elections or the national elections. And so that's caused a lot of problems. Even your local library board is now a battleground. We'll run for your local library election. A lot of those elections are actually voted into to run your local
Yeah.
libraries. And in fact, we got one here in May that I'm working with. I'll be releasing some emails about this soon. But we have election here in May for our local library board. So there's a lot of local ways to easily get involved, and you always want to start with what you can have an impact on, a reasonable impact on, and not what and not like your governor's race where your impact is very, very, very thin. You're going to have a greater impact, a lot bigger impact locally. So start. Secondly, uh, we've Jeremiah, a number of prophets say, you need to be doing good to your city, and the way you do good to your
Mm.
city is it Jeremiah 30, Jeremiah 29, Jeremiah 30, where it says, God's sending Israel into Babylon. He said, I want you to go there, and I want you to do good in that city, and the way you're going to do good in that city is have kids,
Mm.
is build a family, and in exile.
Yeah.
And so I would really camp out on that and say, start with building a faithful family, because God's making it really easy in your town. The liberals are not having kids, and if they do have kids, they kill them. And then if those whatever kids kind of get through the liberal gauntlet and actually live and come outside the mother's womb, well, they are not being discipled well. They're growing up to hate God. They're growing up to hate their culture. They're growing up to hate their families, and they're growing up to be very violent kids. And so you have an opportunity just from a familial level to really build and have an impact in the next generation. My goal, I try to think in terms of 40 years. What can I accomplish in one generation? So I'm 43 years old now. So what can I accomplish in the next 40 years? And so my goal in the next 40 years is to do my best to turn Idaho into a beacon of light. And that starts with my kids, and that starts with my county. And now I've, by the grace of God, I have an opportunity to impact Idaho beyond my county because of some of my work in politics. And so I have the ability, I can do a little bigger impact on the state things also. And so I have some influence and impact there. And so over the next 40 years, I would like my kids to be able to reasonably buy a house in Idaho. The bar's low. And I want to see the economy continue to have an impact. And so that's, start with where you can have an impact. And of course, that starts with your family, your job, and then your community, and then kind of assess the situation from there. But I can't tell you, if you look at the voting statistics, probably in your county, in your state, I know in our county alone. So I'm in this liberal county. Well, if the conservatives, if 60%, 65% of conservatives would actually get out and vote, we would not have a liberal mayor right now.
Right.
Like, I live in a liberal county, and we could actually not have a liberal mayor if conservatives actually would just be engaged. And so there's a real apathy in the conservative movement, and to show up, like I said, at presidential elections or governor elections, and that's about it. And then you lose your city, you lose your county, you lose your library board, you lose your local public school board, and then here we are, and and then we turn into complainers. So get involved, and it doesn't take much to know what's going on in your county, in your community, as you know, Greg.
Yeah. So you actually perfectly led me into my next question, because when you were talking, I'm thinking, and I'm sure most of the listeners know this because your case was national news, and I'm sure you're tired of talking about it, but I look at someone like you who was arrested while singing in public, put through a 2.5 year court battle. You won, by the way. Not only won, but soundly won. I mean, you really spanked the local municipality. They didn't even know how to enforce or what they were enforcing when it came to social distancing through their ordinance or through what their state constitution said. You get really no punitive damages, no money. You're out 2 years of your life. You sat a night in jail. I look at you and I go, how are you not apathetic towards the system? I have so many Christians that come to me and they just go, they're apathetic, meaning I can't focus on it. I can't care. I got a homeschool. I got, a business to run. I've got, family things to do. And here now I'm supposed to pay attention to politics and be involved in that. And whatever, I'm just going to hole up and try to make a nice little life for me and my family, and leave it to the rest of the people. What do you say to them? And not everyone has to be involved in politics. I don't think that's what we're saying here, but not to just become apathetic to the secular world in general as believers.
Yeah, I mean, one of the simple answers to this is it only takes 15 minutes a year to get involved in politics. If you're a family, you're in the middle of raising kids, you're in the middle of busy life, work, all that is going on. Well, it only takes 15 minutes. It takes, 3 minutes to call a friend who knows what's going on, who to vote for, ask them why you're voting for them. Is this, ask them, is this a principled politician that I should be voting for, a Christian, all that stuff. That takes 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, to Google, whatever. Always good to call who knows the candidate, so you kind of secondhand account of that politician versus even internet. And then it takes you 10 minutes to go to the voting polls. I don't know, some counties it'll take a little longer to stand in lines or whatever, but it really doesn't take that long to get out and vote and to have an impact. And then take another 20 minutes, 10 minutes or whatever, to figure out all the races that are going on the next year and just map them out on your calendar. We got a library race in May coming up right now. And then next November, we got another race. Just map out those dates and just know you got to pay attention for 10 minutes around those dates, and then you're fine. I mean, a little bit of engagement is going to go a long ways.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's priority. When I've talked to a lot of people, it sounds like it's very low priority, and one, they don't think they could make a difference or will make a difference. Two, sometimes I get pushback and they go, I don't really see a biblical mandate for holding civil government's feet to the fire to a biblical standard. I think you and I would disagree. Maybe expand on that a little bit. What if you have someone that comes to you and says, like I said, head in the sand. I just want to make sure that I have my 2 weeks vacation, my family's safe, and I'm self-sufficient. All good things, by the way, all biblical things. But I'll let someone else do that, or I don't think that we should even be out there running for local offices and protesting and activism, if you will, whatever that form looks like. I know it's a very general word, but what would you say to a Christian that says, yeah, I don't see a biblical mandate for that? Would you disagree? I think you would. And why?
Yeah. First off, that reasoning is not working out for us really well right now. Now we got transgender library drag hour.
Yeah.
Secondly,
Yeah.
it's really weird that we apply logic to the government, but we would not apply that logic to the family government. If a pagan father
Mm,
was telling his kid to go steal from the local Walmart or whatever, and we saw it all going down, we would step in. In fact, you have a duty to step in.
yeah.
And and the kid shouldn't respond to his dad and his dad say, "You need to submit. I'm your higher authority." That's the odd thing about all this in Romans. The only verse you really hear evangelicals start to push is verse 5.
Yep.
You need to submit to the government. That's it. So Romans chapter 13, verse 5 is really the only verse that's ever appealed to in all this. You need to submit to the government. But we don't apply that to fatherhood. We don't apply that to the church. If the church is raping if the Catholic priests are raping its kids, we don't say the Catholic priest can't say, "Hey, you need to submit." Well, in the same
Right.
way, if the civil government is politically raping and pillaging its citizens, which it is,
Yeah.
we don't we don't blindly submit. And Romans 13
Yeah.
is very clear that the government's job is to do good. Well, what is that standard? What is the definition of good? Who sets the standard of good? Well, it's God, not the government. And so the government's
Yeah.
supposed to do good to those who are doing good and do evil to those who are doing evil. And so that line of reasoning is really broken because we don't apply it to any other place in our life. If your boss at your company tells you to, start siphoning off a little bit of money off the top of the accounting spreadsheets, well, and the boss says you need to submit to me. No, we don't just arbitrarily give a
Right.
totalitarian authority to any authority in our lives, whether it's your boss at work or your dad at home or your mayor in your city. That kind of logic and reasoning is very flawed and not biblical. And I'll say lastly to this, um, uh, if if a law, if a set of laws are going to, run a state or run a country, then what is the best law? God's law.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not man's law. Man's law is contradicts. It's
Sure.
hypocritical. It's it judges wrongly. So why would I
Yeah.
not want God's law to influence our city, our county, our state, or our government? It's the best law.
Yeah. Some of the pushback I get too is someone might tell me, and I've had someone tell me this. Well, Paul was writing Romans, or whoever you believe the author of Romans was. I believe it's Paul. Under an oppressive Roman government, and they didn't start rioting. They didn't start changing laws. They lived peaceably as they could without being, they're burned alive or their throats slit. So why don't we model that now? Outside, I want to get your perspective on this, but there's also very good examples of Peter, Dr. Joe Boot, who you know very well. You actually introduced us. Uh, was talking, I think, about it at the Fight Laugh Feast conference in South Dakota about how Peter stands up and says that there's no other name by which you are saved. It was the same inscription on the Roman coin. The Caesar was God, and you were saved by him. And he was very well standing up to the government just as much as he was standing up to the non-believers.
Mhm.
There's there's also places where Paul uses his Roman citizenship to his advantage. Excuse me, can you do this to a Roman citizen, or do I have to have a fair trial? And of course they say, oh, we didn't know you were a Roman citizen. Yeah, you're correct. So there's ways you see Paul using the legal system and his status as a citizen. But I've had people more than what I would think come to me and go, well, they didn't rise up and fight under an oppressive Rome, so why should we defy tyrants under an oppressive United States or European Union or Australia or whatever it is? What would your pushback be on that? I'm just curious.
Oh, there's levels to that.
We're going to solve all the
partly,
world's problems right here, Gabe.
yeah. I mean, loving your neighbor, one of the most basic ways to love your neighbor is to not let tyrants push your neighbor around.
Mm,
If you love your city, if you love your county, then stand up for those who are being pushed around. It's really basic in some sense. Um, if you think about how our nation has developed over these years, God's law, um, the Christian influence, the common law influence on our country, and all that, we've coasted off it for so long that a
mm,
lot of people can build all these assumptions off that coasting, and but once that train hits the brick wall, once that coasting stops, once God's law and the Christian influence on our country is totally severed, which is it's
mm.
almost there.
Yeah.
We are walking into a totalitarian regime where literally in California and in the state of Washington, just this past year, passed legislation that they can take your kids away if you won't let them transition. If the government finds out that you're keeping your kids from sexually, transitioning from a man to a woman, woman to man, whatever it is, and you're the parent that's prohibiting that process, they will
Wow.
confiscate your children. And so,
Yeah.
the laws of our land are now finally getting detached to where people, I hope, can clearly see that we need to reclaim our Christian founding, our Christian roots, and reclaim the center of what a Christian society looks like, because we coasted off it for so long, we took it for granted for so long, and so now we can have some of these arguments that are not intellectually sound or accurate according to the Bible, but because we're coasting on this Christian influence, they can sound reasonable. But once that train
Mm,
hits that brick wall, like it's starting to happen now, all the wheels falling off that argument as we speak. I don't know if that quite
yeah.
really answers your question,
No,
but
no, that's
that's the
good.
root of it. Yeah.
No, it's so good because I mean we're getting to the point of exactly what a depraved heart wants, absent of God. Obviously, I believe when this country was founded, and you can go back and read a lot of letters and a lot of literature about the many of the founding fathers saying this is for a moral people by biblical, godly standards. I believe God's law does restrain wickedness, and I think once we are off of that standard, of course, we're going to see what man's heart truly wants, which is total depravity and anti God, the spirit of Antichrist. With that being said, let's finish up this section here with this then. So there's a lot of talk about theonomy, Christian nationalism, and we're not going to get into that whole argument right now. I just wanted to maybe give the listeners maybe a 50,000-foot overview of what your belief is of what would a civil government that is serving Christ or that is establishing Christ's purpose look like? Are we looking
Mhm.
at something that was more closer to the U.S. Constitution, where we incorporated some general equity and Mosaic law and then tried to also give personal liberty? Are we going back to a more hardcore theonomy, where we're looking at kind of the nation of Israel and in every little judicial law? Or are we looking at something different? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I'd want to start the conversation here, where God has given us three forms of government. He's given us three authorities in our
Mm,
society. He's given us the family government, the church government, and the state government.
typical. Yeah.
And so each of those authorities have kind of a direct calling from God. So the family government doesn't get its authority from the state, and it doesn't get its authority from the church. It gets its authority from God. And same for the civil
Amen.
government. The civil government doesn't get it. So these governments authoritatively, get their marching orders from the Lord. So I would want to start there. And secondly, related to that, this is where the conversation immediately goes, is, well, what about the whole idea of separation of church and state? I absolutely amen the separation of church and state. I don't amen the separation of Christ and state. I don't amen the separation of God and state. The state
That's
reports to God. The state doesn't report to the church. The church doesn't report to the state. The church reports to God. So they're vertical, authoritative reporting procedures that each of these government institutions have. So with that in mind, then we can kind of start talking about, well, like I said earlier, I believe the best law is God's law. And
Yeah.
And so I would want God's law to be the foundation of all our laws here in society. And when I say foundation, the Westminster Confession uses the phrase "with good and necessary consequence." So we recognize that we aren't in the liturgical laws of Leviticus anymore. In fact, we recognize that there's laws in Israel that were in context of that time, but I don't want to get rid of that principle. I want to apply that law with good necessary consequence to us here and now. I don't want to do away with the New Testament. I want to figure out how to apply the Old Testament. Excuse me. I don't want to do away with the Old Testament. I want to figure out how to apply that Old Testament with good necessary consequence here and now. And lastly, there's two other categorical issues I think that need to be solved here. One is there were three kinds of law, three categorical laws in the Old Testament. You had the liturgical law, the moral law, and the civil law. So liturgical law was done away with in Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is our final prophet, priest, and king. That's why we he's our final priest. That's why we don't sacrifice anymore. So the liturgical laws are done away. It's very clearly ended in the New Testament. The moral law still applies today. I'm still called to not commit adultery in my heart. I'm still called to not, covet my neighbor's cow. I'm still called not to steal,
lie, murder,
all that stuff. So the moral laws still apply today, and the criminal law, that civil law still applies today, but with good and necessary consequence. So what do I mean? Let me give you an illustration by that. Paul in I'm drawing a blank. Paul in I want to say Corinthians, First Corinthians 9. He says, talking about paying your pastor, paying your elder as well, and some of them get double honor, and you don't want to muzzle an ox. You wouldn't muzzle an ox, so don't muzzle your pastor. And so what Paul's doing there, he's actually applying that principle of good and necessary consequence. He's saying that, like the Old Testament law says about not muzzling your ox, well, don't do that for your pastor either. So he's taking Old Testament law and applying it in the New Testament with good and necessary consequence. And that's how we should be thinking Christians when we talk about God's law and applying it to our civil, our county, our city, state context.
And here's the thing, and then we'll end this this section here. I feel like this is a hot button issue, but even me growing up in the 80s, 90s, looking back 50, 60 years into United States history, this was the general consensus of most Christians anyway, how the country should be ran. I look at, like I said, the founding fathers, and they kind of took a general equity approach, right? Like that's why we have things like building codes and safety things. And, when you go back to that law. So I'm not sure why this is becoming such a hot button issue. Now we're going to have AD Robles on next week, and he's going to break it down for us. And, he takes a very certain approach, which I think might be more of a lightning rod. But I'm just surprised that maybe it's because the secular culture is moving so far away from Christ. It feels that much more bizarre. But overall, I would say that's a pretty general idea. But most Christians, whether you're Presbyterian, Baptist, evangelical, it was, oh no, we should be taking Christ's law, that general equity kind of, like you said, well, you didn't use those words, but in applying it into our criminal and judicial codes. So it always kind of surprises me that this is now such a big issue. But I appreciate those thoughts. Let's wrap this up. Let's move into Fresh 10. I sprung this on you. This is where we ask you 10 fresh questions. You don't know what they are. It's so our listeners can get to know you a little bit more. Obviously, you show your true self on Crosspolitic. on every episode, which I absolutely love. There is no facade when it comes to the Water Boy. But we just like to ask some fun questions, and then we get to compare them. So you can go, you can see what your answers are to James White or the Doug Wilsons or the Michael Browns of the world. So you ready to play some Fresh 10?
Let's do it.
All right, let's go.
Yo, can we kick that one more time? Let's go. I'm fresh. I'm fresh.
All right, here we go. 10 fresh questions. Rapid fire first. Who's your favorite actor?
I like Denzel Washington. I like Mel Gibson. That's a pretty Mel Gibson's a pretty taboo one. But I grew up on Lethal Weapon, and all that.
Yeah. Yeah. Full disclosure, this always gets some people in trouble because these are very general questions, and people will say a certain actor or movie and go, and they have to preface it. We understand. Listen, one of my favorite movies I watch over and over is Payback, which is an old movie from the 90s, and he just wants his 70 grand, Mel Gibson. And I think it's one of the better movies that he did. Okay. Question number 2, moving right along. What do you wish you had known 10 years ago?
Oh man, that's a good question. I think I wish I would have been working a little harder on learning more about economics and how and what our country economically is doing to destroy itself.
Oh, that's good. Question number 3. What 3 albums are you taking with you on the desert island?
3 albums. Oh man.
Or you can just give us one,
Lauren,
even if you give us one.
Lauryn Hill.
Okay.
I'll say, but even though he's getting out of my favorite here, but Brad Paisley, I love his country music, but I hate the fact he's involved in all this Ukrainian silly, celebrity stuff. So, Lauryn
his
Hill,
guitars
Brad
are
Paisley,
awesome.
Yeah, and Mumford and Sons.
Wow, that is a spread. I love it. All right, question number 4. What properties do you try to buy when you're playing Monopoly? Are you a Boardwalk and Park Place guy, or do you go for those slums on the first row?
Oh man, the last time I played Monopoly was with my kids, and it's just your desires. And when you're competing, you want to pick the rich places, and but yeah, I don't have a good answer for that. My kids change my motivations for that game. It's more about being fun and.
All right, so what's a movie you can watch over and over? Not necessarily a favorite, but one you can just you go, oh, it's on, I'll watch it. I don't get really get tired of it.
2 movies. Hoosiers
Okay.
is
Good.
so good. I've liked that. My dad got me hooked on that. We used to watch it before every basketball season. And then the other one is with it's oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank. It's Jimmy Stewart, the Christmas.
Wonderful Life.
Yeah, It's a Wonderful Life. Yeah, It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah,
I almost watch it every Christmas too. And as you get older, it's amazing how much better that movie gets and how much more you appreciate it as you get older.
Yeah, for sure. All right, question number 6. The flux capacitor is fluxing. You're in the DeLorean. You jump in the time machine. Are you going back 100 years to visit your great-great-grandfather? Or are you going forward 100 years to visit your great-great-grandchildren?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I would love to go back and meet my great-grandfather because I would love to hear about my family's history and past. And then, of course, you'd love to go forward because you want to see, what I believe God's going to bless my family to 1,000 generations, and I want to see what impact they're having on culture and society. I'd love to see that.
You got to pick one.
Forward.
I knew it. The post mill came through. No post mill has ever said back in time. I love it. All right. Question number 7. What's the best piece of advice someone has ever given you?
Two things. One is keep short accounts. Confess your sins quickly between you and your wife. Keep short accounts. That has been an invaluable principle in my marriage. And then I remember when I was getting married, my father-in-law said to me, "You need to be like an oak tree for your family. When the wind blows, you don't blow over. When the storm comes, you're an oak tree, and so you need to read the Bible, follow God, be faithful in such a way that your roots are deepening and you're becoming a stronger oak tree over time."
Oh, that is good advice. All right. Question number 8. You're a creative guy. Are you a morning person or a night person? When do those creative
So
juices get flowing?
I'm a night person, but my wife is more of a morning person. And so I kind of got to strike a little bit of a balance. I usually end up staying up later, but not as late as I used to. And she ends up waking up a little earlier, and then I wake up, earlier than I'd like to. So I had to split the
There you go.
difference.
Yeah. All right. Question number 9. What is one thing people would assume about you, but isn't true?
Um,
He's thinking.
I would say, so I definitely wear my emotions on my sleeve. I definitely am more on the goofy side of things, and oftentimes I kind of I'm a joker, that kind of stuff. But I'm I think a little more thoughtful and theologically um,
Mm,
studied than people might think, and so
right.
that might be. I'm not a smart guy. I'm not saying I'm you know
No, I get what you're saying.
but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No, you have that persona. Okay. Last question. On Crosspolitic, for some reason, I don't know how it happens, but you have the ability to interview for a half hour any theologian, dead or alive. Now, you can't choose Christ. Any theologian or scholar, dead or alive, you got a half hour on Crosspolitic. Who you calling in?
man, I would obviously Apostle Paul would be my number one. He be my number one, but I got a Fab Five here. I got a Fab Five here. Apostle
Oh,
Paul,
do all five
uh,
then. All right.
yeah. Apostle Paul would be number one. I would love to interview Clement because he was kind of that second
Mm,
century
yeah.
leadership. That would be really interesting to interview. Um, I I think Constantine would be kind of third century there, and then he would be interesting with the whole Roman era and all that stuff's going on, and then Saint Nick would that's my number 4, Saint Nick there,
Yeah.
and then I think kind of more recently, probably R.L. Dabney would be probably round off my top 5 list.
That is an interesting 5. The most interesting 5 I think we've ever had on the show. I like it. All right, there we go. That's Fresh 10 with Gabe
Can
Rench.
we kick that one more time? Let's go. I'm fresh. I'm fresh.
All right, Gabe, thanks for spending some time with us. Do me a favor, throw out a little info about Fight Laugh Feast, where people can get the app or how they can sign up for it. And maybe just give us a little 30-second preview on the Fight Laugh Feast conference coming up in October.
Yeah, you can download our app. It's in the App Store, Fight Laugh Feast. Just Google Fight Laugh Feast in the App Store or Crosspolitic in the App Store, and you can download our app. It's a great place to go. We're actually doing a major update to our app here in the next month. Our conference this year is at the Ark Encounter. I'm so excited about this. We
So
have
good.
room. I think Lord willing, we'll sell out. We only got room for 2,000 people, and so get your tickets now. And we got Ken Ham speaking. We got Dr. Gordon Wilson speaking. Of course, our favorites, Pastor Wilson, Toby. We got Joe Rigney speaking this year. That's a
Nice.
fun one. And but here's the cool thing. One of the things that we want to do at these conferences, we want to make them a family experience. So we kick off the conference with Beer and Psalms. That actually happens on Wednesday night this year. Normally happens on Thursday. So this is October
Okay.
11th through the 14th I'm talking about. And so Beer
Mm-hmm.
and Psalms kicks off on Wednesday night. And the reason why we did that is because we wanted the families to be able to have opportunity to go experience the Ark and the
Yeah.
Creation Museum. So Ark on Thursday morning, Creation Museum on Thursday morning, the Ark on Friday morning. And I only had like 20 minutes to check out the facilities when I went through because I was making sure it was going to be a good facility for our conference. And so I got
Yeah.
20 minutes to walk through the Ark, and it's a 3-hour, 4-hour experience to walk through the Ark. It's a
Yeah.
life-size replica, and it really is a historical, scientific, and spiritual experience.
Yeah.
Because you kind of connect with what the scriptures is talking about a little more as you experience walking through the Ark, going up each row. Their exhibits are really good, and then of course the scientific implications of the Ark Encounter worldwide flood is massive to our
Yeah.
Christian doctrine, and then the spiritual aspect to it that God judges and God saves.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually pulling, my kids are actually, they've never gone to a conference with me yet because they're always in school and being homeschooled, being at school at Logos. And so we're actually pulling them out of school and they're going with me to the Ark Encounter because I want them to experience that Ark Encounter. There's an interview with me and Pastor Toby interviewing Ken Ham. And I kind of jokingly, because Ken Ham raised $100 million to build the Ark.
Wow.
It was a lot of money. And
Yeah.
I kind of jabbed him a little bit, and I said, "Hey, why'd you waste $100 million on wood to build this ship, to build this boat?" He doesn't. I called it a boat to build this boat, and he said, we get about 1.5 million visitors a year to the Ark Encounter out in middle of nowhere, Kentucky,
Yeah.
and about 30% of those visitors are non-Christian. So he gets about 300,000 people a year that are not Christians coming out and experiencing the Ark Encounter and seeing this historical, scientific, gospel presentation of the scriptures.
That's awesome.
So really,
Yeah.
and he kind of turned that around on me and he said, how many people is your church reaching every year? And I'm like, well,
Yeah, true. Well, that's so cool, man, that you guys are partnering with them down there. I know the conference is going to be good. And guys, listen, for those listening, don't undersell the Fight Laugh Feast app. We were talking earlier about what do we do if you're apathetic. I don't feel like I could get involved. Go sign up. Go pay these guys $5, $10, $20, $50 a month and support people who believe the way you do, who are bringing you incredible content. If you go on that app, there's just so many good things. I'm a member. I encourage each of my listeners to go check it out. Don't throw your money at a pagan company like Ben Shapiro and Daily Wire. We go, oh, he's a good conservative. Look at, he doesn't believe that Christ is ruling and reigning now. He's a pagan. A lot of his people, I mean, he is, gay hosts on there who are having and adopting babies and celebrating all these things. Go give it to believers that are actually changing the culture for Christ. And the Fight Laugh Feast app is a good way to do that and to sign up for a monthly subscription. So, Gabe, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you taking time. I know you're extremely busy. You've got calls to make and meetings after this. But I'm excited to see you this October. We will be there at Fight Laugh Feast, and we'll make sure we link all this up on the website as well, too. Guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of Dead Men Walking Podcast. We appreciate you listening, commenting, sharing with a friend. We couldn't do it without you. Our only goal is to bring glory to God. And remember, as always, the chief end of man, to glorify him, enjoy him forever. God bless. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Dead Men Walking Podcast for full video podcast episodes and clips, or email us at deadmenwalkingpodcast@gmail.com.
None your business.